Let's go on to our Monday panel now, and we're joined by Mixed Breakfast host in Adelaide, Ali Clark, and from Melbourne by City Councilor Roshena Campbell. Good to have you back on the program again, Roshena, after your little diversion into politics of that Aston by-election. I always thought it was madness to have a by-election on April Fool's Day, but there are many, many reasons why you were unsuccessful, both local and national, I think. How did you enjoy the experience, and has it put you off politics forever, or could we see you having a tilt again sometime?
Oh, look, it was a very disappointing result, but there's no doubt there's hard work to be done by our party, and I think there is the will to do that now. So that's something that I certainly want to be part of, and in terms of politics, I'm certainly going to keep doing my bit on Melbourne City Council, because right now our city needs someone who's going to be a strong voice for common sense. Well,
it's great to have you back on the program, Roshena, all the same. So Aston's loss is our gain for the time being. Now, Ali, I've got to get your thoughts on the reports that there moves afoot to bring in 17 more children and 9 women from Syria, ISIS brides effectively. We've had these people come back into Australia now. A lot of consternation from the communities where they're being resettled, concerned about support and de-radicalisation and all the rest of it. How do you see the community dealing with this issue now?
Well, as uncomfortable it is for how they got there, the fact is that they're Australian children in conditions that they just shouldn't be put in. Now, none of these women nor children have been charged with any crime in any country. It doesn't mean they might not be charged when they return here to Australia, but they are Australian, so we need to bring them home, get them out of those conditions and make sure that they are supported, because everybody is fearful, of course, or hopeful and wanting to know that they've been de-radicalised.
Yeah, I mean, what's happened to these kids is just terrible. You can't blame the kids, but it's the parents and the responsibility on them. And I would have thought there's every chance that if parents have knowingly taken them to these areas, Roshena, they will have broken the law. So as we've seen previously, they could face action when they return. But in the end, that's the best option for their children, surely.
Well, look, it's a very sad and difficult situation. I mean, it's worth remembering some of these children weren't born in Australia. They were born there. Some of them have spent their entire lives quite possibly being indoctrinated. So my view is in these situations, national security has to be paramount. And though some families have been repatriated to date, we shouldn't be rushing to bring others back until that national security advice is absolutely clear. And if it is clear that they pose no threat, you need to make sure that their return is done carefully in a considered manner, because what we saw last time when Labor brought some of these women and children back is there was no consultation with the community. Community leaders were up in arms. So we need to make sure, first of all, that it's safe to bring them back, and then that the community is prepared for that, because the re-entry needs to be smooth and it needs to be safe.
Talk about a big news day and a lot of traumatic stories. What about the story of Kathleen Folbig, who was sentenced for the serial murder of her 4 children? She's been 20 years in jail. All sorts of scientific evidence proffered to try and overturn that. Today, she was pardoned and set free from jail after 20 years. Here's some exclusive footage from Channel 9 of her returning to catch up with friends.
Oh my God. My stinky shoes are in your face.
How do you feel?
I am so elated, it's not funny. I'm nervous and I'm everything. Oh.
Is that automatic door? What are you going to do now?
I don't know. I need a drink of water. I don't know about anything else. I'm still like, this is happening. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, the conviction's not overturned, but she's pardoned. The experts may argue about this for years to come, Ali, but if she did not, if she's not, imagine the trauma of losing 4 children and being sentenced to 20 years for their murder.
You just cannot wrap your mind around it. We heard her there saying, I just don't believe it. I mean, and not only that, the world that she is now coming into 20 years on, I am so wrought with emotion thinking about what this first night will be like for her and for everybody involved in this, because there certainly hasn't been any winners in it. And I cannot wait to see about what happens with the review into the judicial system, and hopefully a look at how maybe they can react carefully but maybe more nimbly to any scientific developments as they come to light.
Yeah, indeed. Now, I've got to go to a Melbourne story with you, Roshena. All this argy-bargy about another heroin injecting room or drug injecting room after the one opened in Richmond. A lot of talk about one within your city as a city councillor within Melbourne CBD. Now the plan, let's whack them on a bus. Let's have buses that go around, mobile injecting rooms. What does that say? You just don't get too many protesters from the one neighbourhood?
Look, I've been consistently opposed to an injecting room in the Melbourne CBD. The one in Richmond has been nothing short of a disaster. You see endless strips of shops that are closed, of neighbourhoods that have been brought to their knees because there is drug trafficking on the streets, and that one happens to be located next to a primary school. So you've got kids witnessing people overdosing on the streets and doing drug deals on the streets. And I've consistently said I don't want to see that in our city. Now, I'm in the minority. The majority of my councillor colleagues, they support a CBD injecting room. I'm deeply concerned. I mean, our city is still recovering from COVID. We know that there are plenty of traders that don't want that on their doorstep, plenty of residents, and we don't want it for our visitors. That's my view.
The bus is not an option, though, is it?
Well, the mobile injecting room, to me, that just screams policy on the fly. This is a state government that was desperate to put an injecting room in the city. They've heard the opposition to it loud and clear, and they are not prepared to do the hard policy work you need to do to get these things right, including looking at other options. Do you instead perhaps put that money into rehab services so you break that cycle of drug use?
Yeah, well said. Now, Ali, in your state, the Premier, who seems to be very, very popular and get a lot of things right, he's been forced today to make this announcement. I touched on it at the top of the program about breakfast in school. Here's a recap.
1 in 3 students who attend public schools in South Australia that either sometimes or at least often don't have breakfast before rolling up to school.
1 in 3 kids, Ali, and I know this is happening right around the country. We're one of the richest countries in the world, and we're not feeding our kids before they go to school. I mean, forget state governments doing this. Where are the parents?
Well, I mean, they've given $6-point-something million to get us from 400 breakfasts to 1.4 million or whatever those figures are. But I'm with you. It's just a band-aid over to stopping and working out and how you can better support people who are struggling with cost of living, and also those that aren't parenting. They're not parenting and letting their children do this and be subjected to this. So where are we cutting that off at the pass? Where are we stopping that and educating and helping and doing whatever we need to do to make sure these kids are turning up with full tummies?
All right, 2 quick light ones I've got to wrap up on here. Let's have a look at Albo having a beer in Vietnam. I mean, anyone who's been to Vietnam knows they love their beer and it goes very well with their fantastic food. But why would people have a go at him on social media over this, Roshena? He's there doing diplomacy. A beer and a pork roll is not a bad thing to do, right?
So I understand the point he was trying to make was about Australian exports of barley and wheat. And I put this in a very different category to what we saw over the Australian Open, where night after night
yes,
PM
indeed.
was showing up there while we had a crisis in Alice Springs. And he's put Indigenous issues front and centre of this government. So it was a real shame that he could only spare a few hours for the NT while he's having his cool beverage while he watched the sport. This is in a very different category. I don't oppose his overseas travel, but it has to deliver results. The coalition signed significant free trade agreements, notably with India and the UK. So I'm happy for him to fly. I'm happy for him to have that refreshing beverage. But I want to see results for Australians and the Australian economy. OK, I'll give you, Ali, a chance to create a diplomatic incident because we've been looking at the performance of Joe Biden. He did this on the weekend. Pretty hard to say you're ready to run another 4 terms, still be president 6 years from now.
I tell you what, it was awful to watch, and it's been replayed and replayed and replayed, and it just plays into that narrative that it is attacking him, that he's not going to be fit enough and he's too old to be able to run the country. It is just awful to see, and unfortunately it's put yet another big target in that area on his back. Not that he needed any help falling over.
No, he doesn't at all. I think he blamed an imaginary step there or something. He can't run. He won't run. I've said that all the time.